Jacob Rees-Mogg there citing the DUP, and what they do may determine what he does. How crucial is their decision?
Well, the DUP have 10 votes, and it's an important part of it. They were 10 of the 10 people who voted against last time. That would, if they switch votes, that would change it by 10. But I'm not sure the softening is right, because I think what Jacob was saying was no deal is better than a bad deal, but a bad deal is worse than staying indefinitely in the EU. There is no suggestion anywhere that there is a support for revoking Article 50. So if I interpret what he's saying, he will vote against, and that we should come out on the 29th of March on a no-deal basis.
Well, how do you get there? Because we know Parliament has voted against no deal. Mrs May is intent on going to the EU Council on Thursday and getting delay. So how do you get to no deal?
Well, first of all, Parliament, 2/3 of Conservative MPs, 2/3 of Mrs May's party, voted against any extension past the 29th of March. Parliament cannot force Mrs May now to do anything. The only person who could get an extension or ask for an extension is Mrs May. She's under no obligation to do so, and I hope what she'll do is say, well, we've tried very hard to get my deal through. Clearly that can't go through, so we are now going to come out on a no-deal basis on the 29th of March, as I have promised 108 times in the House of Commons.
But you know, she has said if her deal doesn't get through, then the likelihood is the EU will offer a long delay. So what do you do about that?
Well, she says that, and she would say that now to try and persuade MPs to vote for a deal. But it's if you stood back and said 2/3 of a party said we can't go past the 29th of March, and the Prime Minister come back and trying to sell a deal that's for, a 2-year extension, I don't think it would just be Conservative MPs that voted against that. I think it would be Labour MPs as well. I think that's absolutely not on the cards. The British people voted to come out of the EU. We can't have an extension that would take us to 5 years past when the referendum was. Just not going to happen.
The argument of some Brexiteers is, OK, it's not a great situation, we're not very enthused about Mrs May's deal, but taking the risk that Parliament won't back delay is too risky because Brexit itself could be lost.
Well, a number of colleagues have worried about that, and that's why some of them switched their vote last week. But that was when there was a possibility of Parliament taking over the process. That was defeated last week, and there's not enough time between now and the 29th of March for that to happen. Obviously, if Mrs May gets an extension and there's a bill or whatever, of course the Remainer Parliament could try and stop what the British people want. But that can only happen if Mrs May, on her own, decides she wants to go and ask for an extension. She is under no obligation to do so. My advice to the Prime Minister would be to go to see the European Union on Thursday, talk to them, and see if she can negotiate a transition period of 9 months, a standstill, while we come out and on a sort of easier basis on WTO rules. And that, of course, is something that the EU privately have said they're going to do. But, of course, they won't say that publicly at the moment until we've decided what we're going to do with her deal. So
I said at the beginning, I mean, all options seem to be on the table. What do you think realistically is the likely outcome now?
Well, I think it's impossible to predict. But if I had to say which is the favourite outcome, we have a piece of legislation, a law, that says we're coming out on the 29th of March. And if somebody doesn't do something about that, that's what's going to happen. So clearly, that must now be the favourite position.
OK, Peter Bone, thanks very much for your time. Well,